With great pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, let me now respectfully invite Dr. Ganeshan Vignaraja to take the seat as the moderator, and may I also request the respective panelists, Dr. Ram Madhav, President, India Foundation, Professor Dai Yong Hong, Dean of International Studies, Institute of South Asia Studies, Shenzhen University of China, Professor Jeffrey Till, Emeritus Professor of Maritime Studies, King's College London, Mr. Salman Al-Farisi, Secretary General, Indian Ocean Rim Association, and Ms. Aruni Vijayawardena, Secretary to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Sri Lanka, to take their seats on the stage, please.
Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to welcome distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, to this inaugural plenary on the emerging order in the Indian Ocean. I shall briefly kind of set the scene a little bit and talk about how we might run this panel. We are very fortunate to have had Dr. Madhav and President Ranil Wickremesinghe giving us some big picture thoughts on what we might see in the Indian Ocean. And if I got the take properly, they talked about this being a highly strategic region with great potential globally. And this region could well become a quarter of the world's GDP by 2030. And it's growing faster and it's trading faster than the world economy since the pandemic. So it's pretty dynamic. So we have the economic side, which is the promise of great prosperity for these three subcontinents within this region. But at the same time, we have these different challenges which are brought about, not least of which is this geopolitical competition between great powers, which can put this prosperity at risk. We also have all these non-traditional security threats, illegal fishing, rising maritime crime of other sorts, environmental disasters, the debt problem, which is there for many small countries, and weak regional and global governance under the World Trade Organization and other institutions associated with this. So our job today in this plenary is really to take a deep dive into these issues and look at the opportunities, but also the challenges, and try to suggest some practical policies that countries in this region may adopt to create a much simpler and more prosperous order in this Indian Ocean. Now, we have an excellent panel here to give us food for thought and stimulate the thinking for the next sessions, which may go on. And their bios are available in the pack, so I'm not going to go through them in detail. In terms of the structure of the session, we have about an hour. So each panelist will have about 5 minutes. We have 5 panelists, so each panelist will have about 5 minutes for some short initial thoughts, ideally very policy-oriented thoughts. And then we'll have some kind of a discussion, and I will attempt to summarize the ideas. I will kindly request each panelist to be strict with the time of 5 minutes. I have a reputation for being quite tight when it comes to time. And we must set the example, I think, of the President coming pretty much on time and pretty much starting on time, and that's what we must do. May I invite now His Excellency Salman Al-Farisi, Secretary General of IORA, to give his remarks. Please, sir, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I would like to underline the geostrategic and economic cooperation, importance of the Indian Ocean, as already stated by previous speaker during this conference. Indian Ocean is one of the most crucial maritime regions in the world, connecting major trade routes between Asia, Africa, and Middle East. It holds a vital choke point through which a significant portion of global trade flows, thus again holding geostrategic importance. With its approximate area of 70 million square kilometers, indeed, Indian Ocean, the third largest ocean in the world, plays an important role in the worldwide maritime, shipping, and fisheries industries. However, Indian Ocean region is also the focal point to both a traditional and contemporary threat, as there are many converging issues within the region's architecture. Ladies and gentlemen, it is important for Indian Ocean Rim Association, or IORA, which now Sri Lanka assume the chairship, to ensure that the Indian Ocean remain a zone of peace, security, and cooperation. Indian Ocean should remain peaceful and stable amid the projection of competing geopolitical forces. This region must be approached in a comprehensive manner, not only from the security aspect, but also from the economic development aspect. IORA, with its membership of 23 member states and 11 dialogue partners, serve as the first line of defense to build upon existing national, regional, and international measures. In line with the Charter, IORA seeks to build and expand understanding and mutually beneficial cooperation through a consensus, a voluntary, and non-inclusive approach. IORA continue working to address traditional and non-traditional security challenges by focusing on cooperation and norm setting to achieve sustainable and inclusive growth, among others by adopting IORA strategic framework of action to combat maritime debris in Indian Ocean region, developing IORA guideline to prevent, deter, and eliminate IUU fishing in Indian Ocean, developing blueprints on maritime safety and security, and developing guidelines on humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. Ladies and gentlemen, we witness the Indian Ocean region now is moving toward multiple additional entities with diverse priorities and interests. Therefore, IORA is keen to deepen its link with various stakeholders to ensure sustainable economic growth in Indian Ocean region. I wish to stress that sustained economic growth requires collective sufficiency and increased resilience of the people toward emerging global challenge. Collective sufficiency needs collective effort from all stakeholders in the region, including regional organizations and our dialogue partners. That is why IORA is now strengthening its collaboration with other regional organizations to synergize effort to maintaining peace, stability, and prosperity in the region. I believe that by working together to having secured, peaceful, and prosperous Indian Ocean, we will be able to achieve sustainable and inclusive growth in the region. I thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for these very insightful remarks on IORA and also for sticking to the time. Professor Till, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Right. Can I have my PowerPoint presentation up, please? I hope this isn't counting as part of my 5 minutes.
No. PowerPoint එක දාන්න පුළුවන්ද කරුණා කරලා?
Okay. Right. Thank you. I think the real question, ladies and gentlemen, this morning is not so much what will the new order be, but really, will there be one? What happens in this region is a combination of internal developments and global ones, and I'm going to concentrate on the latter and their maritime consequence. But first of all, we need to deal, I think, with the black swan problem, the unexpected event that transforms everything. There are so many of them that, as Henry Kissinger has recently said, nearly all countries are kind of recalibrating their approach to the world. And two of the biggest of the problems, of course, are the black swans, like the COVID pandemic and the rate and intensity of climate change that we've all been seeing in the past few weeks. And I think both of these illustrate the point of the damage and the dangers of strategic inattention, not paying enough attention to what might be happening. And these were two black swans that really shouldn't have been. But I think there are three predictable events that are really going to dominate things. The first is obviously climate change, as I just said. The second is technological change. And the third is the prospect of international conflict. I don't mean fighting, I mean conflict. These are all very much interconnected, and I want to talk briefly about all three of them in turn, starting off with climate change. And I'm going to do it all from a maritime perspective, because as Mackinder said, we're all involved in all of this, and one should always remember that everything at sea is connected to everything else. So let me start by talking about climate change and affecting that. Now, we all know that the chemistry of the Indian Ocean is changing, its waters are heating up and putting everything else at risk. And this is especially dire for the fishing industry and the whole of the region, on which so much else depends. It's partly a function of climate change, partly a function of destructive methods of fishing. And the same kind of threats can be seen towards the sea as a means of transportation, as well as resources. So we need to get control of all of these things. And we know, broadly speaking, what needs to be done. Maritime domain awareness, effective governance, and so on. But developing that kind of capability requires a level of cooperation that in turn depends on the general atmospherics, political atmospherics of the time. I said that all these things were interconnected, and the interconnections are equally obvious when one talks to the second of my three predictables, technological change. Think of the role of fish aggregation devices in destructive fishing, for example. The fact that new technology is of equal benefit to the bad guys as well as the good. And we all know that one of the big issues now because of climate change will be the push for green energy. And we need to think about what the consequences of that might be, either if it's unsuccessful or B, if it's successful. What will it do to the dynamics of the Indian Ocean region, for example, if the oil trade ceases to have the importance that it currently does? But the Ukraine war has also shown us that there are other forms of technological change that are challenging existing ways of doing things. Drones, AI, machine learning, the growth of the data sphere and all of that. We need to get a handle on all of this. But the Ukraine also demonstrates the fact that this is going to be difficult because of the undeniable trend towards international conflict, with China and Russia in their own ways and at time questioning how things should be done, at a time when there are genuine questions about the sustainability of US leadership. I would commend an article in the latest version of Foreign Affairs, for example, by Robert Gates, who raises some very interesting issues about all of this. So the prospect, actually, is not of New World Order. It might be of New World Disorder. I'd refer to this, Nagorno-Karabakh. Hardly any comment on the fact that what we've seen is the invasion of one disputed territory by another country with hardly any comment. Does this mean that resorting to force is going to be the new normal? Does this imperil observance of the principles of the UN Charter, which have dominated the world order to date? The consequences of that are so dire, it seems to me, that it really does raise the importance of de-risking those three predictables, and maybe another one as well. Apart from sticking to agreements, what do we need to do? Well, we need to identify the other side's point of view. How else can we properly react to it? Persistent engagement, despite everything, seems to be important here. We need also to develop the habits of cooperation where we can against common threats like piracy and things like that. Governments need to maintain options, and so do navies when they're designing their fleets in order to be able to cater for as many contingencies as possible. Now, I started with the Black Swan, the unpredictable event. But of course, the paradox is that the unpredictable is predictable. We know we're going to be surprised. we need to cope with that factor of surprise. I started with the black swan. I'll end with another analogy from the animal kingdom, one of my favorites, the meerkat. Constant watchfulness seems to me the emphasis that we should always focus on. Always making sure that in our horizon scanning efforts, we have one guy who's not looking in the same direction as everybody else. And it seems to me watchfulness, preparing, being conscious of the fact that there are real challenges that confront us is something that all governments ought to make a top priority.
Thank you,
So
Professor. I need to stop you there. Thank you. So, Professor Till from King's College, London. Now, let me invite Professor Dai Yong Hong, who's Dean of International Studies at the Institute of South Asian Studies at Shenzhen University in China. Professor, you have 5 minutes. Okay. Thank you.
Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Yong Hong Dai from Shenzhen University, China. I think the topic today is very good, emerging new order in India Ocean. As I'm from a new emerging new economy, China, and I'm also from an emerging new city, Shenzhen, and emerging new university, Shenzhen University, which has only 40 years of history. So my topic today is about China-EU cooperation in maritime security governance in the Indian Ocean, a perspective of safe lane security. So originally I think that I might have for 10 minutes. So only 5 minutes, I can only talk the last part of my speech. So let's just go over all of this. Let's come to the direct last part of my policy advices, because this topic is going to look at the possibility for this emerging new order in Indian Ocean to see what potential cooperation we can have through the joint efforts of these outsiders and insiders in this region. So actually this first part I skip over. Last part, okay. I talk about the third prospects for China-EU cooperation. To talk about cooperation, we need to find the common grounds for the partners. What are the advantages and the disadvantages that the partners may have in their cooperation? So for EU and China cooperation in the security governance in Indian Ocean, I think that first, we should seek common ground while sharing differences, promote the convergence of ideas and the improvement of situations, institutions between China and EU in the Indian Ocean, and strengthen the maritime security governance structure. First, to build up specialized maritime governance mechanisms around common interests, strengthen cooperation within existing mechanism, just like Chinese escort to anti the piracy and the EU's Atlanta operation since 2008, and to safeguard the economic security of both sides and the security of maritime communications lines in the Indian Ocean, as both China and the EU depend on Indian Ocean heavily for its safety of trade and energy. So most of the EU countries and even the East Asia countries like Japan and Korea, they depend heavily on this safety of Indian Ocean line. And thirdly, to promote economic integration and cooperation and foster new growth areas in the Indian Ocean between China and the EU. Because I find that as EU has advantages in its port economy, its port construction, because you know the oldest the sea powers are mostly in the European Union, and now China is very experienced in the port construction. So maybe China and the EU can find a common grounds in these port economy growth areas. This is number 2. And number 3, strengthen cooperation at the legal level and make full use of international law to improve the Indian Ocean maritime security governance as China also strengthens cooperation between EU, makes full use of this law. And they have some cooperation, as 2 years ago, we had the seminar dialogue of sea-land security dialogue between China and the EU in Beijing. EU's embassy in Beijing, we attended that annual conference. And number 4, strengthen diplomatic coordination and jointly promote multilateralism in the Indian Ocean, because we need to hold the real principles of multilateralism. It's not the fake principle of multilateralism. It's not a narrow idea of cooperation. We should be inclusive instead of exclusive, right? Such as the BRI initiative, which is really a mutual learning and mutual benefits, and joint consultation and joint discussion and joint benefits. And lastly, I think number 5, attach importance to grassroots efforts to consolidate a community of maritime interests and build a maritime security community in the Indian Ocean. As I heard this morning, President of Sri Lanka mentions several times that the Indian Ocean is a public goods providing site, not for some countries alone. It's for all the human beings to protect the interests of the maritime countries as well as the landlocked countries is very important for the human being, because this is the public sea for most of the countries and for all the human beings. And in the bottom-up way, to expand interests and carry out cooperation. Today is a very good example of this grassrooted as well as official exchange side. Because I'm from university, I'm not an official. Actually, I'm very glad to have this opportunity to participate in this dialogue to discuss with my colleagues about the protection of our planet, the protection of our open sea land. So through long-term ocean participation, I think this goal can be realized through the joint efforts by China and other countries, friendly or even some unfriendly countries. I think to talk about the safety or to talk about the human being, we should work together for the common goal of the shared future for the mankind. Okay, this is my advice. Actually, I have 1 more minute to share this good model of global ecological civilization, Colombo Port City Coral Cluster Cultivation Program, which Shenzhen University has participated in this. Because, you know, Colombo City is a good example of Chinese BRI in helping our neighboring countries to realize the goal of modernization. The first phase of this project has been successfully completed, and now we are entering the second phase of business invitation. So now we have this, by the efforts of the former commander of Navy, Sherwan, he has built a center for this coral education center together with Chinese contractor. I think it's a very good way to do this. Look at this. Coral conservation and responsibility in China, as Chinese President Xi Jinping has announced initiated 3.
Sorry, Professor, can I ask you to now wrap up, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is my last part. You can go over this. Ecological. Thanks.
That was Professor Yonghong Dai from Shenzhen University. And Professor, you will have a chance during the Q&A, which is what I want to get to. Now, may I please invite Foreign Secretary, Ms. Aruni Vijayawardena. Please, Madam. Thank you.
Thank you, Ganeshan. So I won't go into the description that we have heard from many speakers before, which is that the shift of the global order towards the Indo-Pacific region and also to the rise of Asia in economic terms, in technological terms, in military terms, and also in terms of prosperity among the people. Now, in this shift, some analysts see an emerging new bipolar world dominated by geopolitical tensions and also competition, while others see a multipolar world with the rapid rise, including of regional powers. And to this, we had this morning from Dr. Madhav, the heteropolar, which is the technology and the other non-state actors who are part of this new order. So it is no longer just a theater of competition between and among great powers as in the past, but the new order is also a space where regional players and in addition extra-regional players are asserting their influence. And in response to these changes in the Indo-Pacific region, we also see the formation or enhanced relevance of a number of groups from the region and beyond. Among others, the Indian Ocean Rim Association, ASEAN, BIMSTEC, AUKUS, Quad, Indian Ocean Commission, etc. Now, in all this, what I would like to focus on is what is the position for smaller neutral countries like Sri Lanka. These emerging changes in the global and regional order provide new and enhanced opportunities for growth and prosperity on the other hand, and cause for strategic reflection on the other. Sri Lanka has historically endeavored to maintain an equidistant stance on strategic contests of larger powers in the Indian Ocean, as we believe in the principle of neutrality and cooperation with all nations and among all nations. The 1971 Indian Ocean Zone of Peace resolution has been referred to quite frequently in the last few days, more frequently than I have heard in so many years of my diplomatic career. I have heard more about it in the last 5 to 10 years. In pursuing national interests, we seek to maintain friendly relations with all states, whether global or regional, while upholding national sovereign autonomy, sovereignty, territorial integrity, non-intervention, and dignity. We believe that the respect for international law, such as the UN Charter and the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, provide pathways to navigate the evolving geopolitical landscape and safeguard the peace and prosperity of our region for generations. Based on bonds of friendship and cooperation with all, and in line with these internationally agreed principles, we also expect other states to adhere to these agreed principles in our mutual interactions. Geopolitical tensions and security challenges have the potential to disrupt the economic prosperity and tranquility we aim to achieve. While being mindful of the tensions in the emerging geopolitical landscape in the Indian Ocean, our objective is to engage constructively with all states for the prosperity of our own people as well as for the region, particularly in this time of economic crisis in the country. We also believe that multilateral engagement, including through regional collaborative platforms of practical engagement such as IORA and BIMSTEC, are constructive. They create institutional and human synergies for easing conflict arising from geopolitical tensions and security challenges, which have the potential to disrupt economic prosperity, security, and the tranquility that we plan to achieve. Accordingly, we believe we can build trust and partnership by practical and operational collaboration on common challenges relating to issues such as transnational organized crime, maritime safety and security, sustainable use and protection of the ocean commons, investing in renewable energy sources, mitigating climate change, and promoting sustainable growth. Thus, in conclusion, the emerging order presents some complex contrasts. The region has achieved phenomenal growth and wealth creation, and yet it faces formidable challenges of sustainability, security, and wealth distribution. A visible abundance of prosperity is confronted by a perceived lack of security in the region. Flashpoints and choke points remain with attendant dangers of escalation. Many of the littorals in the Indian Ocean region, Sri Lanka included, do not want to be clustered onto whatever may be perceived as a wrong side of any given power contestation, as they obviously want to economically stand to gain from all sides for the well-being of their populations. We are therefore encouraged by the premise for those who are students of international relations theory that conflict is not inevitable and that peaceful coexistence is both desirable and feasible through enlightened international cooperation.
Madam, may I please ask you to finish? Thank you.
One sentence. Any theory of power theories of deterrence, containment, balance of power, de-risking, etc., will hopefully enhance and not diminish the space for this pragmatic cooperation while not entailing any new arms race, nuclear or otherwise in the region. Thank you.
May I now give the floor to Dr. Ram Mahadev, the President of the India Foundation, for any supplementary thoughts.
Thank you, Chair. I have already spoken at length in the inaugural session, so I will take just 3 minutes and just 3 points. Firstly, for us, the countries in the region, as His Excellency President highlighted in the morning, we are a civilization, not just a region. We have a distinct world view about our oceans. They are not just regions for us, they are an integral part of our lives. Our gods live in the oceans. So we have a distinct view about the oceans. What is now important for us is to build a knowledge base based not on the parameters set by others, but based on our own ancient wisdom and knowledge. You develop a new thinking about these challenges. We need growth, but also we need sustainability. These two should be complementary. Our ancient wisdom can be of great help in developing ideas and institutions. Point number 2, taking from Professor Jeffrey's point, in the ensuing global disorder, how do you build order in this region? We are in a very plurilateral setup. I used heteropolarity earlier. I am using a plurilateral setup word again. Plurilateralism means we are in the midst of many minilaterals. Small groups of countries, no longer just states. Small groups. Madam already talked about how many groups exist in our own Indian Ocean region. We have IORA, of course. We have Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, BIMSTEC, Asia-Africa Growth Corridor, GCC, ASEAN, Indian Ocean Commission. These are a few. So many of them are there in this own region. How do you build synergy? How do you manage this plurilateralism? This issue needs to be thought about, and that takes me to the last point. The third point is, how do you build institutions? Building order calls for building institutions. For example, His Excellency Anwar Ibrahim, President of Malaysia, talked about creating Asian Monetary Fund, AMF. It's an idea on which some thoughts can be probably given. Similarly, maybe we already have Indian Ocean Commission. There is a European Commission, and allied to it is there is a European Parliament. If there is an Indian Ocean Commission, why can't there be an Indian Ocean Parliament? So how do you build synergy and institutions based on that synergy? That is an important question to ponder over, which will then automatically lead to building an order in this very disorderly world. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a bit of time for discussion, and President Ranil Wickremesinghe, when we met him to discuss this session, asked me to be provocative. So I'm going to ask some questions of each of our panelists and to give them a minute or so to answer, and then we can open it up to some floor discussion briefly. We have about 20 minutes or so, Commander. Would that be about right? So let me start with His Excellency Salman Al Farsi. Much is expected of IORA to support the rules-based order in the Indian Ocean, but the Secretariat seems quite under-resourced and lacking in capacity. How will you make IORA fit for purpose, given all these challenges?
Thank you very much for the very difficult question indeed. But in IORA, we also the academic groups. That's why the academic group has also a very good role in giving us some policy recommendation for the organization to talk about. And then their input indeed will be brought to the gathering of the member states for discussion to get better coordination and collaboration on various issues that challenged by the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being a very good sport. I really appreciate that. To Professor Till, some compare the present polycrisis that you underlined in the Indian Ocean and East Asia with the dark days of the 1930s. What lessons from history can we be drawn to ensure that a naval skirmish between two major powers at sea doesn't become a full-blown conflict, a la South China Sea? How do we stop this in the Indian Ocean? Your thoughts? Simple question.
Yeah, big question. Thanks very much. Yes, I mean, there were incidents, things like the Japanese bombing of the Panay, the nationalists inadvertently bombing British ships engaged in ferrying refugees backwards and forwards, even the prosecution of submarines that were supporting the nationalist cause in the Spanish Civil War, that kind of thing. And it illustrates one of the distinctive characteristics of naval forces is that they are in close proximity in an internationally owned arena. So you can have a submarine from one country, above it a ship from another, and above that aircraft or drones from yet a third and fourth. There are no such divides as there at sea as there are on land. And in times of conflict and tension, naturally that can lead to skirmishes. That can lead to incidents, and we've seen plenty of evidence of that in recent days. Now, there is one argument that basically what happens at sea can be isolated from what happens on land, and somehow we can park it, that it won't have this kind of adverse effect. In the old days of the Cold War, for example, there were lots of people who argued that you could have a limited nuclear war at sea that wouldn't spread ashore. I think such propositions have even less legitimacy and credibility now than they did then. We're talking about a world of interconnectivity. Cyber knows no boundaries at all. So it's bound to spread, if you like, whether you like it or whether you don't. So the preference, therefore, is to try and avoid the incidents. Basically, of course, by establishing and, most importantly, observing the rules of the road. To establish sets of rules about what can be done and what can't be done in situations like that. And here I'm referring to things like queues, for example. And also, I think I would go back to the point I made in my introductory remarks persistent engagement in events like this, for example, so that we know much more about what other people are thinking and can react to them more sensibly. To develop the habits of cooperation against common threats in order to be in a good position to react to the unexpected, if you like. And of course, as far as fleet designers are concerned, to maintain as wide a range of capabilities as the economy can afford in order to give governments the widest choice in how to respond to developing situations at sea or indeed
Thank you.
anywhere else.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much. Now, to Professor Yong Hong Dai, I'm going to ask you the easy question. The ambitious BRI is credited with building ports all over the Indian Ocean, but critics highlight maritime security trust deficits, low economic rates of some projects, and the risk of debt traps. What aspects of BRI implementation should be improved in your view, and what outcomes might we expect from the 10-year conference in Beijing on the BRI from 17th to 18th October? Very easy question for you.
Easy? No. It's a very, very hard question. But from different perspective, I think for BRI initiative as is Chinese proposed, BRI and Chinese president proposed other 3 initiatives except the BRI. And we have this global development initiative, global security initiative, and this year, Global Civilization Initiative. Based on these 4 initiatives, we can understand that Chinese always uphold the principles of openness and cooperation, and peace and cooperation, openness and inclusiveness, and mutual learning and mutual benefits. And to talk about this trust deficit, I should point out this quite misunderstood by some Western media reports. They never mentioned the positive or the good aspects of Chinese proposed BRI, just like they usually do in some other continents. They just ignore the positive benefits. They only focus on this negative sides of this. To talk about this Sri Lanka trade deficit, the trade, this debt problem, it is not created by China. Among all the debts of Sri Lanka government, only less than 10% is owed by Chinese 2 flagship projects, this Colombo Port City and Hambantota. Go back to read the books, and to be a scholar, we should be very scientifically and objective, and to be scientifically rational. We cannot depend on biased information. Read news about China, written by China, by Western media, and by Sri Lanka, the local media. So all these informations should be combined together before we make our final conclusion to tell the story. So this is my answer to your question.
Thank you very much for a very clear answer. Madam Foreign Secretary, an easy question for you. So Sri Lanka, as you rightly said, is recognized as a pioneer in maritime diplomacy for its efforts in the Indian Ocean as a zone of peace, also the making of UNCLOS, and I'm delighted to see Dr. Rohan Pereira is over there, who was very important in that effort, amongst others. Yet small countries in our region are suffering from some economic challenges. What advice would you have from Sri Lanka's experience of rebuilding its brand in maritime diplomacy in the Indian Ocean region, given the crisis that we are now facing? What lessons would you give others in this region?
Well, thank you for the question. I would say Sri Lanka was a pioneer in maritime diplomacy, yes, but also in international peace and security, because that was what the Indian Ocean Peace Zone resolution was about. The nature of the world at that time and also how this affects smaller countries like Sri Lanka. We see the current new order not as a challenge, but also as the opportunity, because if you have growth in the Indian Ocean region and in the Asian region, then these are also multiple opportunities for additional cooperation in the economic front and many other fronts in technology, economy, tourism, so many things. So while we are aware of the strategic and other challenges that are ongoing in this situation, we want to be in a situation where Sri Lanka and I believe other smaller countries of the littoral want to benefit from these opportunities that are around us. And this, of course, requires, because of the current situation, certain confidence-building measures which smaller countries have to demonstrate. So I think this is the current challenge that we face, that we have to simultaneously, while benefiting from the opportunities that we all hear about now with the global growth and focus shifting to Asia, that we also find out how to, in diplomatic terms, build these confidence-building measures in our interactions with the external world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lastly, to Dr. Madhav, so the US-India bilateral partnership is increasingly concerned with the Indo-Pacific security. As reflected in Prime Minister Modi's visit to the United States in June 2023, if my memory serves me right. How would you evaluate independently India's efforts to bolster regional security, including the maritime security dimension?
In one sentence, while the US looks at the Indo-Pacific question from the prism of free and open Indo-Pacific, FOIP they call it, India sees it from the prism of free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific. The word inclusive means how do we ensure peace, stability, freedom of navigation as an inclusive effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we are running out of time, but maybe if there are any urgent flow questions, I propose we collect 2 or 3 and then give the panel a short chance to answer. Are there any questions that people want to ask? If you can raise your hand or this, we can give the panel a chance to answer. There's someone in the back. Can we get them a mic? Yeah, please. Can you state your name and designation, institution, please, madam? And a short question, not a comment. Thank you.
Very short question. Medhadi Alvis, attorney at law. My question is, we spoke about pragmatic cooperation in this session, and we went to the extent of even proposing a parliament in the Indian Ocean region. I would like to ask on the entire panel, however, through the decades, we have never seen enough pragmatic, viable cooperation among the institutions like IORA and the other institutions together. We haven't seen that. So what are the real pragmatic steps that you would propose? And it's easy to propose steps, but for every step that you propose, what is the timeline that we can have? Please. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other? Did you want to ask a question, madam? I can't. Is there anybody there? Okay, I don't see any other hands. Let me just give the panel. Anybody would like to answer? Madam or Secretary General, would you like to start? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think what the approach of IORA is indeed, as you mentioned, on a practical cooperation. As I mentioned earlier, that we are now developing what we call it as the framework cooperation to combat the IUU fishing. We work with the leading country for that is France and Indonesia. We also working on the disaster risk management. India is working on the guideline on that, also as well as the guideline for the maritime safety and security. And on the environment issue, we are also working the guideline, the framework cooperation on marine debris, for instance. We are working also with Australia, for instance, and then in the next months, we will have a training program on this issue with Singapore and South Korea. So there are many practical cooperation that we have, and then now many dialogue partners that we have, 11 right now, and to be 12 under the leadership of Sri Lanka. We will indeed develop more and more cooperation, which is more practical and action-oriented to address the need of the member state. Thank you very much.
Madam, would you like to say something?
Yes, please. Thank you. I think that question is interesting because, what we are looking at is that institutions can provide, that conflict is not inevitable, that you can create institutions for practical cooperation which foster, as the Secretary General was saying, collaborative efforts that help us to overcome these challenges. So there are in the multilateral, for example, in the United Nations, in IORA, in BIMSTEX, there are so many examples where collaborative platforms can help us to pull synergies together where we can avoid conflict. Conflict is not the only way we need to go. We like to strongly believe in that. And I think that is also the suggestion about the Parliament of the Indian Ocean is also that in that direction. Thank you.
Would anyone else? Dr. Madhav, would you like to say anything? And then we can come here, sure.
Pragmatism demands that while building those institutions or already managing the already existing institutions, we should respect plurality of voices. We should recognize plurilateralism. Nothing should be offered as fait accompli while building institutions. Nothing should be imposed. That is when, pragmatically speaking, any institutions can function. Today, the biggest challenge for existing multilateral global institutions is they do not function on the principle of, number one, sovereign equality, number two, democratic pluralism. These two principles are not really recognized or acknowledged by our global institutions. Whoever has the power is running those institutions. So, talking of building these institutions that I proposed, these fundamental principles should be agreed upon. Fortunately, that is in our blood, in our, it's our basic characteristic in this region. So maybe we will be able to build institutions more effectively here.
Thank you. Professor Till, and then I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, I think the key thing in the question was the question of timelines. How much time do we have to develop these sorts of institutions? What seems to me to be the lessons of both climate change, technical change in terms of things like AI and so on, is the fact that we're likely to have the problem before we have the institutions that can deal with them. We're always going to be reacting to these sorts of things, and the only thing we can do really is, rather than to create ideal theoretical institutions that can cope with everything, is just to develop pragmatically, in that famous word, the habits of cooperation as much as we can with those situations that we can deal with right now, in the anticipation that we are going to have to do everything on the hoof, as they say, without warning, without having thought about it previously, when these unexpected crises appear.
Please.
Okay. For the pragmatic cooperation mechanism establishment in Indian Ocean, I think two essential points are very important. The first one is to understand what is the basic principle of pragmatic cooperation. To my understanding, it is mutual respect and the real principle of multilateralism. instead of exclusiveness, right? The second point is that how to get a solution to this deficit in this region, in its trust building. I think because differentiation of demands and capabilities inside the region and outside the region. For example, the countries within the region, their political systems, ideologies, and development philosophies differ greatly, and their interests differ. So we need to have mutual respect to differences in political system, different development philosophy, right, mutual respect. And the countries outside the region, the different resources and capabilities, different priorities, and different attitudes towards cooperation. So long as they choose to cooperate, we should cooperate with the countries, big or small, treat them fairly enough, big or small, right? This is the mutual trust. And the last point is about these characteristics. As I said, that's to seek common ground while sharing differences, promote the convergences of ideas and improvement of institutions. Maybe you have differences, but put aside the differences. Let's minimize the differences, but maximize the common grounds. Choose to protect our planet and protect this ocean. Okay, this is my understanding.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasurable task to sorry, Commander, did you want to say something? Please, can we give the mic to Commander, please? Thank you.
Quick, not a thought, but I'll probably like to direct this to Professor Jeffrey. Now, earlier today, I mentioned about this overspill of gray zone conduct or conflict into this region, and this particularly the maritime nations and the coastal states involving in this. Now, how do you suggest to mitigate this impact? We have enough problem already, the transnational crimes, the other issues, than the maritime nations involving in the Indian Ocean in a conflict sense. So this, outside of the Indian Ocean, this gray zone overspill leading to conflict here in the Indian Ocean, how best that we can mitigate and prevent this happening in the Indian Ocean? How can we build more trust among these nations, maritime nations particularly, and try and avoid this?
Thank you. I think Professor Tilley mentioned you by name, so please.
Yes, I think the challenge of the grey zone is that it obviously makes sense for countries with major issues at stake to avoid war. And in order to try and secure what they want while still avoiding war, their temptation is to exploit the gaps, to find other ways of doing things that perhaps the other side hadn't thought of. And that's why there seems to be so much attention being paid to grey zone operations at the moment. And the problem where states, for example, behave with the kind of moral profligacy of terrorists, for example, and simply don't observe the rules of the road that have already been agreed, is that it kind of corrodes mutual trust that my colleague here has just been talking about. So I think the way of dealing with it is to try and do those sorts of issues about maintaining engagement in order to try and get over to the other side that exploiting gaps is actually a tactical move that has no real long-term sustainability. Because if we get to a situation where there simply aren't any rules, we will not have any kind of order other than the kind of order that applies in the jungle, where might is right and that's the only thing that matters. So that has to be avoided, it seems to me. So trying to avoid doing things that challenge the rules is effectively what we should all be doing.
Thank you. Let me try to briefly summarize this very rich and wide-ranging discussion. The first point, I think there is some agreement here that this Indian Ocean is a very distinctive region within this broader Indo-Pacific context. It's distinct from East Asia, it's distinct from Southeast Asia, it's distinct from the Pacific, and I think that should be recognized. And it's a region with tremendous opportunities on the economic side. It could account for as much as 25% of world GDP in the next few years. It would be an amazing region with the environmental potential, and there are these fish and resource stocks. And also it's a region with great potential for maritime-led growth around ports, but also within the hinterland of ports. And some of these opportunities were talked about, and for green goods as well. So that is very much on the table. At the same time, there are these challenges, and I think the one that came out particularly, which is existential, is the geopolitical set of challenges within the region. This was talked about in the context of a multipolar world, a heteropolar world, a plurilateral world. I think we learned a lot of new expressions here, which I think is very interesting. And then, of course, there is the environmental dimension, I think, that came out as well very strongly. And then the point about inclusion, which I think is very important. Inclusion across countries, between small countries and large ones, and also within countries. And the inequality that may arise within countries is also a tremendous challenge that can be there. In terms of solutions, I think there were many perspectives here. And the one that I picked up was this need to consider New World disorder. I think, Professor Till, you talked about this. We have to be in permanent chaos, I think is right. And I think Professor is drawing on chaos theory, and I look forward to seeing more from him. And we have to, in that chaos scenario, think about creating these trust relations between countries and build deeper trust through regular dialogue, such as this Galle dialogue fulfills a very important role. We have to rebuild and strengthen the patchwork of regional institutions, IORA, BIMSTEC, and maybe even an Indian Ocean Commission in a proper sense, and going down the road to an Asian Monetary Fund or an Indian Ocean Monetary Fund. Why not Indian Ocean Monetary Fund? And institutions for that, or why not an Indian Ocean Development Bank? Maybe that's an important idea, and maybe we have great powers that might work together in such an endeavor. So institutions are critical to build the trust. And another very important idea that came out to me was that think tanks have a very important role to play in track 2, track 1.5 dialogues. These may be the India Foundation, the Geopolitical Cartographer, and many others in our region, I think, are very important. So we can discuss the difficult issues within an academic space and come up with very pragmatic solutions. And I was also struck very much by the idea that while everybody in this room deals with crises, we have to also have this idea of foresight and look at the future challenges. 1 or 2 people, I think, is what Professor Till said. And then we have to look at success stories. You pointed to 1 or 2 success stories in the Colombo Port City and the ecological dimension, and we must replicate success stories. And then particularly we have to have a mechanism for dealing with these possible skirmishes at sea and other conflict areas, and be very prepared for that. So we had a very rich discussion, and I apologize to this esteemed panel if I didn't capture all the important points, but I think we should give them a big hand for great discussions and being very sporty. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much for being very sporty. Thank you, Professor. Sorry about my...
Thank you very much for the moderator and the respective panelists for the insightful session. May I now respectfully invite the Commander of the Sri Lanka Navy, Vice Admiral Priyantha Pereira, to present the certificates to the moderator and the panelists of the plenary session. Dr. Ganeshan Vignaraja, please accept this memento. Professor Dai Yong Hong. Professor Jeffrey Till,
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, my dear.
It was
Very
really
good moderator.
well.
Timely, sweet, the efficiency. Very productive.
Look at the president asked me. I have no choice.
Mr. Salman Al Farisi,
Keep in touch.
Of course, it would be great, and Admiral is a great friend. Collaborate.
Dr. Ram Madhav, and Ms. Aruni Vijayvardhana. Thank you, sir.